Welcome to Real Estate 360 with real estate expert Kenn Renner. My name is Sandy McElroy, and we have a lot to tell you about today, and something that you're not going to hear in many other places. What we're going to talk about today is your recent execution of a 1031 tax exchange.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes.
That needs to be handled very, very delicately. Take your time with, and it takes a little while.
Oh, yes.
That's
Sandy,
where I'm asking.
I know. You're a radio guy that wants to do real estate. I know you. Want to
No.
I know you want to get your license, just like everybody else in Austin. You know, everybody has a license.
I've seen too many people starve.
But they got a nice car.
Yeah, they have a nice car.
They have a nice car. A nice lease on a car.
Right.
All right. Yeah. So, anyways, 1031 tax deferred exchanges is not a it's actually it's a code in the IRS to be able to help investors be able to reinvest their property into more and more property without paying capital gains up front. It's called a deferred exchange. So it's very common in the industry. So when we're talking about that, it doesn't happen all day. My story with this whole thing, and I want to tell this long story, has to do with how I was able to take one property, and turn it into 9 properties for my client. But it had to be done based on the 1031 laws, the 1031 tax deferred exchange laws by the IRS code. And it also took a whole lot of relationships. You can't just get overnight with our building crew, with our 1031 exchange specialists, with hard money lenders, with our credit line people, with attorneys for doing reverse exchanges. This whole process that I took this client through was almost a 1-year process from start to finish. When he made the decision to do this, to being able to defer a huge amount of taxes.
I have a quick question for you about this. How would somebody know that they're in a situation where this is to be used?
Okay.
For their average layperson, how do I know?
So what it is that with a tax-deferred exchange means if you own an investment property, you're allowed to sell that property and put it into what's called an exchange. In other words, be able to buy more properties. Mm-hmm. Now, but because you might be selling a property a single-family home in California, you might be trying to buy a 10-unit apartment complex in Austin, Texas. The exchange is done what we call a delayed exchange, because it doesn't all happen. It can't happen at the same time normally. In other words, it'd be great to have this one selling, and then the day of closing, these 10 units are under contract and ready to close. So that's part of the problem, and that's why the IRS allows us to be able to put our for sale property into what's called an exchange, where you don't touch the money, and be able to choose properties out there, and it could be anywhere. They call it like-kind properties. All it has to be is investment property. It could be land, it could be agriculture, as long as it's producing income. It could be income. Mostly it's income-producing property, like retail and multifamily. And it happens anywhere from a small scale, like what I'm going to be talking about. It's not a small scale, 1.4 million, but on up to mega millions, where the huge apartment complexes and shopping centers are being done with a 1031 exchange. And it just simply means that they can move their equity from this property to this new purchase without paying the gain that you would normally have done if you sold the property and then bought the property.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so the way it works and the rules are that once you sell this property, the day of closing on the we call it the relinquished property, the one you're going to sell, you have 45. The IRS says you have 45 days to name a certain amount of properties. Usually it's either 3, or there's 3 rules, but the one that people usually use the most is the 3. Got to name 3 properties. Or there's also what's a 50% rule, or a 200% rule, which means you can name up to 200% of what you sold. So in this case, 1.4 million, he could have named 2.8 million in properties. And what we mean by named is, within that 45 days, you have to name those properties, and those are the ones that you have to pick amongst those that you've named, and you have to close on those to make the exchange work. Once the 45 days is over, you don't have any more opportunity to name properties, and you have a total of 180 days from the sale of the relinquished property to exactly 180 days to close on one of those properties that you've chosen, or group of properties that you've chosen. That leads to, and you don't touch the money. You have to buy in other words, if you cash out and you close and you take that check home, you're going to pay the government a huge amount of taxes. That's why we have what's called an exchange accommodator. It's like an escrow account.
Okay.
the money, the profit from the all the proceeds go from the closing to this accommodator who holds the money like an escrow and waits for you to finish the transactions of the uplift properties. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So the that's the common thing people ask, why would I do it? First of all, why would I get to an exchange? You have to talk to your CPA and your financial advisor, because they're going to say, well, maybe I should cash out and pay the taxes and move on with life and not have to worry about it. Or maybe, wow, that's going to be a heavy tax hit that maybe I should go ahead and not and do a 1031 exchange and buy more. So the problem comes in is when you're selling this property, but you don't have all the rest of the properties lined up. During that 45-day period, that's all the time you got. It becomes a scramble trying to find the properties, and sometimes you make some not so good decisions because you're like, okay, I'll take that one just because I've got to be able to close on something. I got to name something and close on it. So it can be a very tenuous situation. In this case, he sold the property for one single family home in San Mateo, California for $1.4 million. Okay. If he did not do an exchange, in my calculation, I'm not a CPA, check with your CPA, he would have paid somewhere around $360,000 in capital gains. And then another $100,000 in depreciation recapture. That's $460,000. Mm-hmm. Oh, I forgot he's in the state of California. So they get their little chunk. So it's basically a $500,000 tax hit. So he did well with this property. He's got $1.4 million. If he sold it and took the money, the government would say, okay, I want 500 of that 1.4. So you're going to end up with 9 after taxes. Or you can exchange all that into more of equal greater value like-kind properties, which is what we did with investment for investment is what like-kind means. And we'll just go ahead and defer that capital gain into these properties. So that is a huge benefit because you don't pay. It's tax deferred. Doesn't mean that he's not going to pay taxes until the day comes when he gives it to his son or daughter or heirs when he passes, and they get a stepped up basis. Check with your CPA, because if you make too much money or have too much assets, it doesn't play. But they get what's called a stepped up basis, and they won't have to pay the taxes that Dad would have paid if he'd sold that property and sold out and cashed out.
So this is a long play.
Well, it's not just a long play. It's a way to defer paying the government. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, when you pass, if you do it right, then nobody paid the government. You say you can avoid death and taxes. You can avoid death and taxes, right? Well, you can avoid taxes through this. That's through the stepped up basis. It's one of the big government giveaways that not a lot of people really know about that aren't in real estate. Okay. So what's our time on this right now? Because I've covered a lot already, and I haven't even gotten the story. We might have to break this into 2 podcasts.
We're about 8 minutes in.
All right, I'm talking fast.
Is a guess, about 8 minutes.
All right, so this is a true story. It happened. It started about this time last year. A client of mine, we're going to call him Mr. Bill, because I don't want to, of course, give away his true identity, but his name was Bill. And so Mr. Bill is a former client of mine. He had bought a house from me several years ago and then turned around about a couple of years ago and sold it, and probably wished he didn't, but he was okay. He made some money on it. And then I hadn't heard from him. I always stay in touch with my clients, but I hadn't heard anything like, hey, I want to invest. It was only one house. But he came to me and said, hey, Ken, I trust you. We did pretty good last time, and I just want to find out. I've got a house that I've got to sell in San Mateo, and I'd like to talk to you about what would you invest in? Because he's looking all around. He could invest in a fourplex, a duplex, Austin. It could be Memphis. Who knows where he was going to go? So I kind of talked about the situation. I talked to him about that 45-day period, and I talked to him about the 180-day period and how tenuous that can be. Now you've closed on this $1.4 million. What are you going to do with it? You're scrambling around looking for properties. Let's do a different strategy. How about this? We'll get with a volume builder, and we'll tell them that we'll buy $1.4 million worth of their houses that are under construction. In other words, they're not ready to close right now, but they're under construction because you want to meet that 180-day period, but they're not starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. So that way you can name your properties even before you've closed on or sold and closed on the relinquished property. Therefore, you already know what your upleg is. Mm-hmm. That was one of the things that took the pressure off of the whole fact that he didn't have to worry about that scramble to find the properties in 45 days. And that's a lot of property, 1.4 million. I mean, and so having all those properties already lined up and ready to go is with a strategy. So got with the local builder, the local biggest builder in town, in the state of Texas too, got with him and I said, I went to management. I said, hey, let's go have lunch. Actually, they want to take me to lunch because we'd been their number one realtor, and we went a trip, and all kinds of our team went a trip to Cabo. And so we're like, well, let's take you to lunch. So I got with the vice president and the president of the building company. I said, here's what I got. I got this guy that wants to buy, this many properties. It turned out to be 8 at the time, but it ended up being 9. That's part of the story. 8 properties, that adds up to about just like 1.3, 1.4, which is that dollar amount that we were looking for. And they're like, and this is a building company that cut off investors because they ebb and flow on whether they're going to allow investors in at all, because there's a limitation. But in this case, they were looking at their inventory, and they actually gave me their inventory. They had 240 specs hitting the ground, which is inventory homes hitting the ground in the next 6 months. I said, hey, I can take care of 8 of them right now. And they were like, okay, Ken, we trust you. Let's go ahead with this. I said, well, the thing is, the house, it's November. We had this meeting, and he's ready to put it on the market. But the market's a little soft right now, and there's a tenant in place on the house in San Mateo. So we're going to sell the house, and I showed him the market time in San Mateo at the time was only 2 to 3 weeks, and they're getting full price pretty much at the time. And the tenant would be out in January, the beginning of January, and it would sell in 2 or 3 weeks. And by the time the first house was done, late February, we'd ordered the exchange is good, we're good to go. So they're like, okay, and so agreed, and both parties agreed. So we went out and picked out 8 houses, 3 in this neighborhood, 3 in this neighborhood, and 2 in this neighborhood. Added up to our 1.3, 1.4 that we needed to do. And so everything's going along fine. So, Christmas comes and then New Year's, and about mid-January, I'm like, I called up Mr. Bill. I said, hey, Mr. Bill, I'm excited for you. Is the tenant out yet? Ready to go ahead, and we're going to go ahead and close this puppy and get the money in the exchange. And we got all these houses lined up that are going to close in the next 6 months. And he's going, well, yeah, we're running into a little snag. I'm like, here's what.
Not what you want to hear.
Yeah, okay. So,
not what you want to hear.
So by the 3 weeks into it, I think the tenant finally got out. But what they said is his son was the realtor too, so it was Mr. Bill Jr. Mm-hmm. And they got in there and they found out that the house needed some it needed renovation. Well, that's not. I mean, they still sell out there. They sell without renovating, but they said, look, the wiring's all 1950s wiring. It's got to come out. But if you're going to take that out, then you may as well go ahead. They didn't really tell me this at the time, but they said, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and put it on the market in late January, and we should get it. Then I go 2 or 3 weeks later, back beginning of February, I go, guys, about ready for a first closing. How's that sale going with the house in San Mateo? Well, we ran into a little bit of snags and stuff.
Again.
All right, so we ran into snags to be able to pull this off, but you need to sell that house to be able to make this work. I mean, how are you? They're going to be wondering, are you going to be closing on any of these? Like if I start saying, oh, we can't. I'm sorry,
sure.
Building company. I know, Mr. President of your building company. I took a $1.5 million worth of property off the market for 6 months, and we're not closing. And
I haven't given you a dollar.
And then we get some earnest money, and it's like my reputation's on the line now.
Right.
Okay, because I'm their top realtor, and now my reputation's on the line. So I'm like, oh, this is a personal thing. I mean, this could really mess with me and the builder. And so, anyways, we just they got into the renovation, and then of course, late February is coming up. I'm going, look, we've got to either tell them we're not going to close on this first one because it was like one staggered after the other, and then or we're going to have to do something, because if we bust on the first one, they're going to go, are you going to bust on all that question's going to come up. Mm-hmm. If we bust on the first one, what are we going to do? I mean, because they're going to say, then the whole deal could crater and you get to pay $500,000 in income tax.
Right.
So he goes, okay, well, we'll figure it out. I don't know what to do, but we'll figure it out. So what I figured out was that he had a house near San Mateo that was worth $2.5 million, and he didn't owe a whole lot on it. And I said, well, since you haven't bought this, you haven't sold your property yet, and I'm going to have to delay with the builder. I'm going to have to play delay games with them because we don't want the whole thing to fall apart. Let's go ahead and do what's called a reverse exchange. Like, what? What's a reverse exchange? So we got a local attorney, the top attorney in town that does the exchanges. He also an exchange accommodator, so he could hold the money as well. Mm-hmm. And what they do is that you actually buy the property ahead of time in an LLC, and then that property is waiting for you for when your property actually sells. And then you actually buy that property that is you've already closed on with the exchange money that you have. It's just basically doing it backwards. You're buying the property first and then closing on it once. But the thing is, you have to be able to qualify or pay cash to buy that house so that it can be, and really is pay cash for it. But he didn't have the cash. So I went to the builder. I said, okay, the first one we're going to have to punt on. It backs the railroad tracks. We don't really want that one. But this one we're going to close on, and so I got a hard money lender in California to loan him on a equity line of credit on his Belmont on his house near San Jose, and got him $360,000. I said, good, now we can close cash on two of them. They're about $170 a piece. These mm-hmm. houses. There was 8 or 9 houses, all around 160, 170, some more, some less. So now we're going to save face with the builder. First one we're going to close it, and then we're going to close the second one. By then, that house in San Mateo will be sold. And we're going to be going on to number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So
nothing ever goes as smoothly as planned.
Yeah. So we're ready to close on the first one. He's the builder's title company is saying, okay, go ahead and send the money. I'm saying, no, do not send the money because that money has to go through the attorneys to do an exchange, a reverse exchange. The little young lady at the title company goes, I'm just doing my job, and it told him to send the money. Well, Mr. Bill just goes, I was told to send the money, so he went ahead and sent the first $170,000 to the title company, but it wasn't in the legal exchange or the reverse exchange, so therefore it's no longer qualified for being part of the exchange.
You've got a mess now.
Now he's bought a property that doesn't meet the exchange and won't be in the exchange. He owns it free and clear, but that's all fine and good, but it doesn't save it on the taxes. That was the whole point of doing this. So anyways, that was a hard conversation to have.
I would imagine. How much time did you spend thinking about how am I going to do this?
Okay. Yeah, that was a tough time, but it was like, this is why you hire an expert. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a strategist, and I put the pieces together, and I knew, and then the attorney knew in the background what I was doing. In the meantime, I had to be diplomatic with the builder and play the delay game and hope that they don't put the pressure on going, I hope you're closing on the next one. Mm-hmm. I hope you're going to close on the next one, because if you're not, we don't believe you. And they could bust those deals just like that.
Right.
So the next deal came along. That was the second one. It actually finally he got put in the reverse exchange, and the rest of that money on the equity line of credit was paid to make the deal happen. That was the first exchange property. So I'm going, Bill, this would all be solved if that property had sold. Well, we haven't put it on the market yet. Because we got a few more things, and I'm like, all right, this is getting really tough. We're now into March, and we're going to be soon heading into April, and we've got more houses to close, and you don't have any way of closing on them. I don't know how we're gonna. And you've already named your properties. Your 45 days is up. You're done.
What do you do? I mean,
or no, it hadn't. The 45 days wasn't up. But the bottom line was, it was getting very tenuous. And I said, okay, what's going on? So he was originally going to put it on at 1.3 because they did the renovation, because it took a little bit longer, and because he was selling it in the tougher time of November timeframe. He actually it was a blessing that he renovated and waited, because he put it on the market at 1.3 million and it sold for 1.45.
Okay.
But that wasn't until mid-April they're going, okay, here's the next one, and we still haven't closed the house. It hadn't even been sold yet. It hadn't even been on the market yet. We're mid-April. We're going on that Cabo trip with the builder and all their staff.
Right.
And it's late April.
Yeah.
And I'm going, when are they going to bring up the conversation?
Right.
When are they going to tell me, are all these going to close? Are you really good? And when they were out on their fishing trip, they were out catching marlin, the president and all their team, and I'm back at the hotel. I got a text from Mr. Bill Jr. It says, the house has sold, multiple offers. It's going to be closing in 2 weeks. Cash at $1.45 million. I was like, whew.
Really?
And then, so then I got back to. I waited till they got back from their trip, catching all that tuna and all the marlin, and we're in a great mood. And I told them, well, let me come honest with you. we didn't sell the house until last week. And and I know it's April,
Right.
but it's a done deal. And now the money's it's a cash offer. It's closing in 2 weeks, and they were like, "Really? All right, sounds good to me." I was like, because it was Cabo, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
So, anyways, we had the money in place. We were able to do that. Okay, so we're now ready to close the next one. It was late April, early May, and all of a sudden we're trying to get a hold of the seller, and no answer. No, I mean the buyer. The buyer. He's got the exchange. All he has to do is sign the papers on the next one. He's got the cash. The attorneys are all set up.
He's been dark on you.
He went dark on me. I'm like going, emailing, texting, trying to be nice, trying to be assertive, no response. A week goes by, and we're like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
what the heck, and then title company goes, we finally got a hold of him. They said he had a procedure, and I said, okay, what was the procedure? And I finally got to talk to Mr. Bill, and he goes, well, I had open heart surgery.
Oh.
I go, well, that's probably a good excuse, for not returning calls. I mean, it was like, I wasn't giving a hard time. I was like, thank God you're doing better. Is everything okay? Because it was like, it's really hard to when they go dark on you. The problem with the situation is once his income was being derived from this house, along with his small amount of income from his company because it was kind of scaling down retirement. But once he sold that house, he didn't have income to qualify for any mortgages. So even though he was paying cash for most of them, he still needed to qualify for 2 mortgages. And those 2 mortgages were because he had to on the exchange, you have to buy of equal or greater value, and you have to borrow of equal or greater value of what you owed on it, the previous property. So he had to borrow $250. So we were going to do the last 2 properties with borrowed money, but he didn't qualify until we got all these other houses rented. So there's another. Now he can't get the loan unless he gets. So now we're pouring resources and working with the property manager, get these things rented.
And you've got your whole team working on this.
A team and property manager leasing and behind the scenes, nobody and even the seller didn't. I mean, the buyer, Mr. Bill, he didn't know what was going on. He's just like, I put this in your hands, can't handle it. And I'm like, yeah. So comes to the end. Last month, a couple of weeks ago, we finally got to the last. We got to the last property, and he rented it out. He did have to get loans on the 2 properties. We got hard money loans, which is expensive, but it accomplished the exchange. He saved $500,000 in taxes, and now he's got $1.5 million of Texas property that's all brand new, all under warranty, all separated. So you have 9 different properties. You could do whatever you want with it. You can play Monopoly with it. You could sell it all as a chain. You could sell one, cash out. You have all this opportunity to do all that. Mr. Bill Jr. is going to inherit quite a nice portfolio of properties.
I'd say so.
And without having to pay taxes on it. So they came out, I was out of town when they came into town, but him and Bill, Mr. Bill Jr. Came out, or I think they both came out together, and they just were like amazed at what we were able to do. We turned $3,200 in income in the San Mateo property into $13,000 in gross income.
Wow.
So from $3,200 to $13,000 plus in gross income.
Amazing.
Avoided $500,000 in taxes. Deferred it. Okay. Deferred $500,000 in taxes. Also got $5,000 discount from the builder on each property. So that's 5 times 9 is what? $45,000 discount because of property that he bought. His position, his life completely changed for the better because of this 1031 tax deferred exchange on one house. But as you can see, all along the way, there could have been one little thing goes wrong, or somebody goes and has an episode, and everything and then you pay. The government doesn't care if you have an episode. If you don't follow the rules, you're going to pay taxes.
It all goes back to what you said early on in this: is hire an expert.
That's exactly right.
You don't want to mess around with someone that doesn't know what they're doing. If they're, you know what I mean.
Well, so
you know what I'm saying. The people that are out there right now that seem to be making.
It's not only an expert, but it's also the relationships that I've had with all these people involved. I got a builder to release properties they weren't even considering releasing.
Right.
So that wouldn't have happened. I got them to let us do to-be-built properties on a property that hadn't even sold. That's basically what we call a contingency. That was really rare for them to bet on the come of this house selling. And allowing me to take 1.4 million of their houses off the market when they could be selling them out to the open general public. Sure. So, like I said, you just said it. There there were all these things that could have blown up, not only for the buyer, but also from the builder's point of view. They would have gone, Kenn, we trusted you, and look what happened. So it's all a matter of trust.
And then then you're done with that builder. If that thing goes bad, you're down the road years.
We won't get any more favors.
Put it right,
exactly. No more favors, and no more free lunches, and no more Cabo trips.
No more Cabo trips. Right.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Anyways, thank God we pulled that whole thing off, and that was the benefit of everybody involved. And that's why you want to hire an expert. And this was not your normal real estate broker type of scenario. This is something that a lot of only investment brokers that specialize like I do for the last 35 years really can piece all this stuff together. All the players, the attorneys, property managers, leasing, the lenders, the hard money lenders, the private money lenders, the 1031 exchange people, the relationship with the builder, the relationship with the lenders, the builder's lender, and everybody involved, the title companies, the attorney, the assistant, and then keeping the buyer happy when one of them doesn't make the exchange, and you go, I trusted you to do this. So
right.
It all came together. Everybody's happy.
Good. And you're relieved. Right?
Let's do it again. All right, anybody out there with ready to do with that? No. Normally it's not that hard.
Yeah, right. That was my next question.
No, normally it's pretty
just
straightforward.
But it goes to show that if you can get that deal done, then you should have a lot of confidence in the next time or anyone that comes to you to do something like this. Mm-hmm. If they knew this case study, then they would be very comfortable in saying, yeah, he's got this. Kenn Renner and his team can handle it.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of information.
Yeah. How did we do in our time there?
It doesn't, you know what I say? If it's good, it's good.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. If it's an hour, great. If it's 15 minutes, who cares? It's good stuff.
I know. I appreciate that. Right. That happens is it's the people's time that I'm really valuing.
Yeah.
Because I know, especially, in drive time and commute time, they only have so much time. So.
Right. Well, that's good stuff.
Good.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Good seeing you, Kenn.
Thanks, Sandy.
You bet.
All right. See you on the next show.